I'm Andrew Joseph Keith. In this video, I'm going to show you my method for taking this clay that I got from Dollar Tree and turning it into a consistent clay that you can use for figurative sculpture. This clay is just called modeling clay or non-drying modeling clay, and it's oil and wax based, and so this clay is the type of clay that doesn't dry out over time. That means that you can't bake this clay in an oven or fire it in a kiln. If you want to make a permanent sculpture, you have to go through the process of making a mold and casting it. If you're interested in the mold making process, there's a video that goes over that. I'll put a link in the description. So when it comes to mixing everything together to get a consistent color, there's a couple of options. The first option is just to mix all the colors. So just take them out of the plastic, put them into the pot, and melt all of the colors together. And if you do that, you'll get this nice medium gray clay. It's like a charcoal gray, a dark gray. It really does feel like a gray. There's maybe a little bit of a tinge of green in there, but it's a very neutral color. I actually really like this gray for sculpting, but it is a little bit dark. And what you run into when you're sculpting with a really dark clay, if you're not sculpting in a well-lit area, then it's hard to differentiate the details on the surface. But dark clays are really good for being able to see the outline of your sculpture. So when I do gesture studies of the figure, I like to use darker clays because that lets me see the silhouette, as if the sculpture was casting a shadow on the wall or something like that. Being able to judge the pose from every angle, it helps to focus on the silhouette. So for gesture studies, or if you're working with a really light area or you have a light background, this charcoal gray is just a really nice color. And I think it's a great option if you want to just throw all of the clay in and just have one consistent color. Because I sculpt generally with a black background, I feel like if I used a dark gray that it would get lost a lot of the times in that background. And so I've mixed together a lighter brown. Now this is still a little bit dark. It's darker than my skin tones, but you can see that it's quite a bit lighter than this charcoal gray that you get if you just mix all of the colors together. And so if you want to get this brown, when you get these colors, you're going to remove the dark green, the dark blue, the purple, and the black. And so you're going to remove these four colors, and then all of the other colors you're going to mix together. And if you do that, then you'll get this reddish brown that I have here. But then of course you have those leftover dark colors, and if you mix those together, then you get this. You get this kind of bluish, maybe with a little bit of green, a dark blue. And this dark blue is just a little bit darker than the gray. It actually looks very similar to the gray, but it's got a much bluer tint to it. And so because you remove those four colors, then when you mix the lighter ones, you'll get this brown, and that'll be 2/3 of the clay. And then 1/3 of the clay, if you mix that together in a pot, will come out with this dark bluish green. It's almost like a turquoise that's been darkened. It's very saturated. It's very colorful. This can stain your clothes really easy just because it's got so much pigment in it. And out of these three, this is probably my least favorite color, though you might like this dark blue clay. So if you're wanting to mix these colors, it's pretty straightforward. Take it out of the packaging and put it into an old pot that you've set aside just for these types of projects. Here's a pot that I used for mixing that charcoal gray with all of the colors combined. Once you melt the colors together, I do recommend that you take it out of this pot. It's kind of a pain to have to scrape it out with a sculpting tool or something else once it's hardened. So what I would recommend doing is using some old yogurt containers or paper cups or plastic cups, and then once it's cooled down a little bit but it's still liquid, you can pour the clay into those cups, and that way you don't have to claw it out once it's hardened and set up. Melting it is pretty straightforward. You just put it on low heat and stir it with a wooden spoon or a paint stirrer. You can use popsicle sticks or whatever you have to stir it. You do want to make sure that it melts entirely, and you want to stir it a little bit while it's liquid to make sure that all of the clay has liquefied, because if it doesn't, then you'll have little pieces of saturated color inside of that clay that you want to be one consistent color. Let's talk about the characteristics of this clay. It is very soft. Even when it's cooler, it's still a soft clay. I like soft clays for larger sculptures. The larger you do, usually you want a softer clay because it's easier to work with, easier to push around. When you're working on smaller sculptures or sculptures that you want to be very detailed, that's usually when you want a little bit firmer clay that holds the details a little bit better. But this clay works very well for working by hands. Also with tools, it works great. While it is soft, it's a little bit oily, and so after I work with the clay a little bit, I can kind of feel those oils in my skin. Because it's soft, it does stick to tools just a little bit, but it's not enough to affect how the tools work. Tools are fine for this clay. If you're using something like microcrystalline wax, that sticks to tools so much that you almost can't even use tools. You have to use your hand. This isn't like that at all, but it is a little bit stickier than some of the other non-dry modeling clays that I've used. So non-dry modeling clay, plasticine, plastilina, they're all different terms for the same type of clay, just an oil and wax-based clay that mixes the clay body or clay medium with oil so that it doesn't dry out like it would if you mixed it with water for a natural clay like terracotta or other types of ceramic clay. I actually prefer this clay to some professional clays that I have tried that are much more expensive. They're like twice the price per pound. And so for the price, this is one of the best deals that I've found on clay. So right now, currently, this may change, you can find this clay at the Dollar Tree for $1.25 per packet. And I believe that you can go online and purchase a box of 20 of these for that same unit price of $1.25 each. But that way you just get an entire box and you don't have to clean out the store every time new clay comes in, which I do all the time. Every time I would go to the dollar store, I'd just clean out the shelves. But you don't have to do that. You can just order it online. So it's $1.25 for 7 ounces or 200 grams of clay. And I'm going to need to work out mathematically what that is per pound and what that is per kilogram. So let me get to that. So this clay is 200 grams. So if my math is right, you'd need 5 of these to get 1 kilogram. So that's $6.25 per kilogram or $2.84 per pound, not including taxes. Now, that's not too bad considering that some clays like Roma Plastilina modeling clay or Chavant NSP clay, these are usually $7 to $10 a pound. And some clays can be as much as $20 a pound. Monster clay, which is really popular right now it's $33 for 4.5 pounds, which again is closer to $8 a pound. So you're looking at less than half for this type of clay. Now, if you don't have Dollar Tree in your area, I just recommend finding, a good deal on clay, cheap clay. The clay really doesn't make as much of a difference as your knowledge of sculpting and your ability to shape the clay. But overall, for price, I give this a 9 out of 10. It's a great deal for the type of clay you get. So who would I recommend this for? Well, anybody that's trying to save money on clay. This is a pretty good deal, though it is kind of a pain to unbox everything and melt it all together and mix it and make your own clay. But if you do a lot at one time, takes a couple of hours. If you have a big bucket, you can just mix as much as you want. If you don't mind that inconvenience of processing the clay and you just want to save a little bit of money, then I definitely recommend trying this out. If you just want the clay to be ready and to just start sculpting, then maybe this isn't the right clay for you. I have used this clay for mold making, but I've only done that with a cheap silicone that I've used that's like a hardware grade silicone. It's silicone clear, all-purpose silicone caulk. So it's not specifically for mold making, but that type of silicone works fine with this clay. This clay does not have sulfur in it, which can give you issues if you're using a mixed silicone. And that sulfur can react with the mold and it keeps the silicone from setting up correctly. So I try to stay away from those. Sulfur also has an unpleasant smell. So this one, you don't have to worry about that sulfur. I've used this clay for sculpting portraits, for sculpting the full figure, and when you're doing larger sculptures, the cost of clay per pound can really add up. So saving a little bit, considering that this clay is like half the price of many other types of clay online, it does add up, and I've enjoyed the qualities of this clay even though it is very cheap. Hopefully you found this video helpful. I hope you try this out and let me know what you think. If you have any issues with it or anything like that, leave those in the comments down below. I'll try to get to that. If you'd like to learn the fundamentals of figure sculpting, then I recommend the Proco Figure Sculpting Fundamentals course over at proco.com/sculpture. If you're more interested in portrait sculpting, then there's also a portrait sculpting course over at proco.com/portrait sculpt. Stay creative, stay productive. I'll see you in the next one.